So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce the resource person for this session. Dr. Shahila Zafar is an associate professor and head Department of English, School of Languages, Literature and Culture, Central University of Punjab, Bathinda. She holds PhD in from V8 University. Moreover, she is a certified CELTA communication expert. She was a Fulbright foreign language teaching assistant from University of Massachusetts, US. Furthermore, she was a visiting professor at George August University, Germany. She has 17 years of teaching experiences. Her area of interests are applied linguistics, discourse analysis, English for academic purposes, English language learning, and teaching. She has received research grant of rupees 13.44 lakhs from various agencies such as ICSSR, British Council, and Seed Money. She has published papers in Springer journals, Scopus Index journals, and Web of Sciences. She has received awards such as the Best Teacher Award for Research Excellence and the Best Teacher Award. She has produced 2 PhDs and currently 4 scholars are pursuing under her guidance. She is a reviewer for the following journals: Frontiers in Psychology, Sage Open, 3L Journal, International Journal of Research Studies in Language Learning, and International Journal of Applied Linguistics and Translation. With this short introduction, I would like to welcome my beloved professor for this session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And before we get into the session, I request Dr. Raj Kumaran to hand over the memento to our chief guest. Please, sir. Please, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Over to Dr. Shahila Zafar now.
Okay, since I'm already on the stage, I'll start from here. But I'll go downstairs in a while because my computer is there and I need to work on the computer for the rest of the lecture. No. I need to also open websites. I'll do it, don't worry. So at the onset, I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference, Dr. Sanraj, ma'am, all the faculty members here. Thank you very much for inviting us. We have had a lot of good time in the last 2 days. We are here for the last 2 days, in fact. We have been moving around, seeing the place. The Tamil Nadu is not unfamiliar to me. This part of Tamil Nadu is new. However, I noticed there's a lot of similarity and still a lot of difference between that part and this part. Whatever I know of language and linguistics, it all started at VIT. As you have been informed, I worked at VIT for a long time. I started as a student of literature, as most of us do. Slowly and gradually, as I was teaching students of language, I got interested in the teaching and learning of language and researching language as well. So my PhD was on extroversion and introversion tendencies and language proficiency and their connection with each other. And then a lot of work later took place within the domain of what we know as applied linguistics. As I moved to Central University of Punjab, it so happened that I had to go back to literature because most traditional universities in India still focus on literary studies. So, of course, I started teaching literary papers, but I did not want to give up on my language studies. So I tried to merge the two to some extent. So what emerged out of it was what we know as applied linguistics. And therein, my focus these days is on discourse analysis. So what we and my students, my students and I, we try to do, we try to look at texts that we collect from different genres of writing. And these texts typically are what we call real life texts. They are not invented texts for the sake of classroom or for the sake of research. These are texts that have already existed, that already are there, and we collect those texts, we collect the text, and we create what we know as a corpus of a text. Okay, and that is the term corpus there, corpus. So when we use corpus of a text and we try to study that corpus, that area of study is known as corpus linguistics. Now, corpus linguistics is a fairly old branch of linguistics, relatively. It started in the 60s, 50s, but at that time, a lot of work was done manually. So you had to manually collect all the data sources, you had to compile, you had to organize, you had to actually study each set, and you had to look at patterns and calculate and so on and so forth. But in the 80s, especially in the 90s, with the advent of new technology, corpus linguistics became much more tech savvy. And so we have loads of software available that we can use to not just compile, but also to analyze text. However, at the end of it all, the human, the human intuition, the human understanding of the text is required. So the ultimate analysis is done by humans only, and so we analyze the text and we look for patterns, we look for aspects of discourse in that text, and we try to come up with our results. So before I move on to this, a little example of corpus-based research would be from one of my students who is working on climate discourse. So she is analyzing discourse on climate in Indian newspapers from 2000 to 2023. So she's collecting the recent data as well as she progresses. So for the last 23 or so years, what all has been written on climate in Indian newspapers in English. But she has, of course, you can't study everything, so you have to delimit your data. So these are the newspapers she's studying, that we are studying. These are the Hindu and the Indian Express, because you can't study all the newspapers that we have in India. So these two newspapers and editorials within those newspapers on climate. Now again, we can't study all kinds of news because you have to finish your PhD too. You can't be studying everything under the sun. So only editorials from certain newspapers, which we consider the prominent newspapers, English newspapers in India. And she has taken all the digitally available editorials on climate change, compiled the data, and uploaded the data, and she's still doing it, uploaded the data on a Corpus software, and she's analyzing that data. So far, her work has brought to us different kinds of frames that these editorials use to talk about climate change. So where does this understanding of framing come from? It comes from the kind of words that are used to talk about this particular issue. So how did she study the words? She used these corpus tools. Now, as far as corpus tools, corpus linguistics is concerned, we begin with looking at words, right? Individual words and phrases, short phrases. And then we start looking at where these words and phrases are used. That means the context in which they are placed. Now, applied linguistics works primarily with the assumption that you cannot study language without studying the context. This is in contrast to formal linguistics, structural linguistics, where you can only look at individual words, you can look at the speech sounds, you can look at the morphology, so on and so forth, or single sentences where you can study what we call syntax and grammar and so on and so forth. But when it comes to applied linguistics and discourse analysis, we make this assumption that meaning is not only in words. Meaning is not conveyed only by phrases or sentences. The ultimate meaning reaches us through the context. When you speak to somebody, let's say, when you speak to somebody, you speak to a friend and you say, do you have a pen? If you look at the form of this expression, what is it? It's an interrogative sentence. It's a question, right? What if the person says, yes, I have a pen? Will you be happy with that? When you ask this question, do you have a pen? What exactly are you saying? Are you just asking a question? No. You are doing more than that. What is it that you're doing? By asking, do you have a pen in a classroom context? You are trying to elicit an answer, but what should be the nature of the answer? If the person just says, yes, I have a pen, will you be happy with that? You'll say, okay, fine, I'm happy you have a pen. No. What exactly you're doing essentially is? Sorry? It is amongst friends. It is amongst friends, let's say, classmates. Without the question, no, the question has a meaning. It asks the question. The question is if the other person has a pen. But if you ask this question, and now the context here is the physical context between friends. Okay, so that is the nature of relationship between the individuals, and the setup is a classroom. And if one person says to the other, "Do you have a pen?" The other person is supposed to say, not necessarily say much, say, "Here, take this pen." Right? The answer essentially would be, the verbal answer is not really required. The physical action is required. Even if the person just gives the pen like that, you would not say, "Oh, don't give me the pen. I actually asked you whether you have a pen." Right? When you are at a dining table and say, "Can you pass me the salt?" Can you pass me the salt? The person says, "Yes, I can pass you the salt, but I don't feel like doing it right now." Would you be happy with that? No, you actually want that salt, right? Even if the person doesn't say anything. Okay? So meaning is oftentimes in everyday situation is conveyed through context. The words, of course, carry meaning. Phrases and sentences carry meaning, but the eventual meaning is conveyed by keeping the context in mind. And oftentimes, when we are teaching in a language classroom, of course, as good teachers, we try to tell what the context may be, but we don't always inculcate this context-based language. We don't always tell, in this context, this kind of expression, in this context, that kind of expression, especially when it comes to verbal communication. In writing, of course, context matters too, but writing is a very tightly, formal writing comes in very tight boxes, genre specific. So if you're teaching people how to write an email, you would teach a particular structure of writing an email, and so on and so forth. But if you're teaching people how to speak in an interview, the interview is structured to some extent. It is not that predictable as writing an email, right? So now back to corpus linguistics. When we work with corpus linguistics, we look at words, phrases, sentences, yes. We also look at the context in which they exist, in which they interact with other words, phrases, and sentences. And of course, the overall context of it all, eventually. Now, what I'm going to do mostly here, I've been given very little time, I'll take only that much time, is that I will work with, I'll display use of some corpus tools for language teaching. So let me go back downstairs. All right, I'm audible? Yeah. No, it's thank you. Okay, so far, what do we know about corpus, the corpus tools as such? Have you used any corpus tools before in your classroom for teaching, for learning? Have you ever used any corpus tools? Many of you may not have heard of this term, the word you may have heard of, but not in the context of language as such. So we may think that we have never used any corpus-based tools or data. But that's not entirely true. We may not have used that label for it, but we are using corpus-based data set all the time. Where do we use that? Any guesses? If you want to know the meaning of a word, where do you go? Do you use the physical dictionary these days? Most of us probably just Go to the online dictionaries. And online dictionaries, if you have seen, online dictionaries show you the word, how it is pronounced, if it's a good dictionary. It may also give you a transcription. It may give you meaning, but not just one meaning. It may give you multiple meanings, which traditional dictionaries also did. But if you compare online dictionary with a traditional dictionary, you would know that the meanings have changed. Some of them at least. Okay, if not all. Right? And how do the dictionaries keep track of this change in meaning? Do they go and talk to native speakers all the time and keep asking them how you change? No. A lot of people are working, collecting data set. The lexicographers are working to collect data about real-time language use, and this change is reflected in contemporary dictionaries. So lexicography is one of the primary domains for corpus linguistics, right? You may have heard of something called urban dictionary, right? Urban dictionary is pretty controversial because it gives you very twisted meanings to very regular words. But then one thing is for sure, even the meanings that are given in urban dictionary, they are not invented meanings. They are meanings that are conveyed by people who use those languages. Oftentimes, those people are young people who consider themselves hip. They oftentimes are the people who live in ghettos, come from the urban poor communities, so on and so forth. Their language is different and very similar to what Bama ma'am was talking about in the morning, people of the language of the downtrodden. Urban dictionary oftentimes represents a language used by urban poor young people. Okay, even if we frown upon the usage and the meaning given of it. All right, moving on. So the term you may be familiar with, but what words come to your mind when you think of it? The word corpus itself means body. Okay, corpse. Of course, this is related, but not entirely the same thing. Okay, and have you used it in your language learning and teaching? You would by now know that you used it in language learning to some extent. Okay, this is frozen again. All right. So corpus is a collection. Now, corpus linguistics is a collection of naturally occurring language. Now, naturally occurring, please remember, naturally occurring means it is already used before. It is not created by the scholar or the user just before they thought of using it. In a sense, it has already existed. Okay, and it is collected and then represented in corpus software or corpus through corpus technology. Okay, so it's naturally occurring means I don't invent it because I have to use it for my software or for my analysis. For example, if I want to study, let's say there's a domain called academic writing. In academic writing, it's a specialized genre. So academic writing, anybody who writes a thesis, they would write an acknowledgement. There's an acknowledgement page, right? There's a particular pattern that we follow when we write an acknowledgement page. We say, I'm thankful to, grateful to, immensely, so on, so forth, so on, so forth. Is there a fixed pattern? No, but there is a pattern still. And it varies from country to country, culture to culture. If I were to study acknowledgement section of, let's say, dissertations in English, I would not create acknowledgement sections first and then study. I would not create 50 acknowledgements and study. I will use what is already existing, that is the naturally occurring language. So I will collect acknowledgement sections from, let's say, 1,000 dissertations, and I will study those and language used there. Then it can be both spoken and written. It's not necessarily written only. And of course, the examples I'm giving are from only the written corpus, but it can be spoken corpus as well. However, collecting data vis-a-vis spoken corpus is very difficult, as is the case with any research that requires spoken speaking-based data, because you have to record. You can't record by just poking a mic in somebody's face. You have to create a situation where a person uses language in a natural form. And then after recording, you also have to transcribe, right? Because you can't be listening to the same audio again and again. You have to somehow put it in a written form. You have to learn how to put it in a written form. And then, of course, you can work with it. Right, and it is typically representative of different varieties, genres, registers, so on and so forth. So we have specific kinds of corpuses, like academic corpus. There is a coronavirus corpus too. There's a big corpus, coronavirus corpus. People are working on coronavirus-related texts. One of my students is working on humorous tweets related to coronavirus. Okay, and she is using this corpus as well as other. And then there is news corpus, and that corpus that uses all kinds of text, we call them general corpus. These are specialized corpuses. Okay, so there is general corpus, there is specialized corpus. And then oftentimes nowadays they are compiled in a computer, and software is used to study these. We don't do any manuals, analysis, or study anymore. Typically, what do we expect in a, what do we typically explore in corpus linguistics? There are three key terms we use, or three key aspects we look at. One is word frequency. And word frequency, as the term suggests, you look at the frequency with which a word exists in that corpus. Why should it matter? Some words will have a large frequency. For example, if you look at this sample, this is from this is comparative corpus, result from comparative corpus. And both the samples show that some words are used more frequently. For example, the is used more frequently. All the articles will invariably be at the top of the list. The conjunctions will be at the top of the list. Prepositions will be at the top of the list. But typically what we look for is the content words. So we look for content words. What are content words? Verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and so on and so forth. We look for content words. So we typically ignore all these in the list, and we look at only content words. There are filters that you can use to only separate nouns, verbs, so on and so forth, all the content words. So here, can you see if there is a specific pattern here and here relatively? Some of the words are similar. Is there a word that is there but not there? B. In that top 10 list here and here, comparatively. Is here as well. Not is not to be found in the second list. On is here, but not this side, right side, left side. Is any content word available here? Any pronoun here? Pronoun. There is me here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, any pronoun? Can you see? There is he, and above that, there is I. There is I there. After this, below by. Okay. Now you may say, okay, these are random results. What do I do with that? Of course, you don't do only with that. You look for other things too. And these lists are. This is cut short. So it will be a very long list. And there you will be, once you start looking at patterns, you would notice that there's a particular way in which words are used. There is a particular frequency with which words come. If you have some familiarity with stylistics, stylistics is the study of style in literature, but stylistics is used for to study other kinds of text as well. In stylistics, we believe that no words occur randomly. Okay, when a writer starts writing, they don't just randomly choose words. They do so very consciously, apart from the functional words, which you must have because you have to frame sentences. The other words are chosen fairly consciously. So, for example, if Bama ma'am wants to talk about, let's say, oppression of the Dalit, okay, she has to use the word Dalit. Can she write without using the word Dalit? Okay, she has to use that. And if she wants to talk about oppression of the Dalit community, she has to use words associated with the Dalit community and oppression, right? So there will be a particular group of words she has to use if she has to talk about oppression of the Dalit community. She cannot be using words from science and technology and talk about Dalit community and their oppression, can she? Are you following what I'm saying? Words are not there just because we have to use some words. We make use of words, especially when we are doing creative writing, especially when we are doing specific formal writing. We use words fairly consciously. We try to be as clear about our expression as possible. So we have to make choices because there are so many words available. We make choices from words. Whatever our intelligence at that point says is the best word, we use that. And so style is essentially your choice of words, how you place them here and there. So a particular author has a particular style because they chose a particular set of words and use them in this particular way. That is what stylistics does. They try to study that. Here also we believe that words do not just randomly come there. They don't just appear. No, the functional word, of course, they must be there and they will be on the top, but the rest of the words, they are here for a reason. And they represent something. What is it that they represent? That is what you study in discourse analysis and corpus linguistics, eventually. Okay. We also, now here is an example from a very small corpus that I collected for one of my studies. I compiled poems from three poets. I was teaching this course, modern literature. So we had some poets in the curriculum and I uploaded the poems. I created 3 different files, text files you can create in the software that I use. I created 3 different files, uploaded. Now this is the corpus I created on my own. For teaching, you don't have to necessarily create your own corpus. You can use pre-existing corpus. A lot of it is available. Here I created my own corpus and I tried to look at the word frequency. Now the corpus is fairly small. The big, large corpora have millions and millions of words. This one has some hundreds. Okay, so it may not be a very, it's a specialized corpus basically. So what does the result say? That in Yeats's poems, these were the top words. Okay, so there was Yeats, there was Auden, and then there was Eliot. Only one poem by Eliot I included, The Wasteland. Okay, so these were the words. Can you see which, does any word stand out there? Or any pattern stands out, if you may say? There are the typical articles and your pronouns, but any pattern that stands, is there any noun here? There doesn't seem to be any noun. What is the 14th one is an error. It's an error. So you may come across, when you prepare the corpus, you typically copy and paste in an what do you call? The notepad. You copy it in a notepad, and oftentimes what you end up copying is also the footnote and the other text on the page, and that might have reflected there. So is there any pattern that stands out? When I was looking at it, what stood out for me was a frequency with which pronouns were available here. You can see how many pronouns there are. His, you, he. 3 pronouns. Somehow they stood out for me. Okay. You may say, okay, fine, words are there. Fine, what do you do with that? this is kind of frozen. Okay, here this is an extension. Anything else? That was the first page. This is the second page, the continuation of that list. Anything stands out here? Is there any noun here? Man. And? Pronoun, all right, she. In continuation to the previous pattern, there was pronoun there. 3 pronouns, we already identified she here. There is a verb, said, okay. This is, as I said, this is a very small corpus, just 5 poems. Okay, just 5 poems of Yeats's, okay. And I further studied those things. I'll not talk about that as yet because this is not where we are focusing on literary analysis of using corpus tools, but this is how frequency of words comes out. This is how it is displayed typically. And as scholars, as researchers, you try to look for whatever stands out. Of course, you cannot randomly claim that something stands out. You have to also have a supporting argument for that. What else do we look for in corpus linguistics? We look at collocation. What other words come with the particular word? So, for example, if I say Mepko Schlenk, is there any word that will go with it? You'll immediately say, no, it's not a complete phrase. It's Mepko Schlenk College. Right? Engineering college. You'll say, no, Mepko Schlenk Engineering College. So these 4 words go together. You can't just say Mepko Schlenk. If somebody says, I go to Mepko Schlenk, it might hurt your ears and say, why don't you say the full expression, Mepko Schlenk Engineering College? Because you have this understanding that Mepko Schlenk goes with engineering and college. This is what we call collocation. Some words always go together. Some words always go together. Okay. So, for example, if I have to say, my mother's, what are the words that come to your mind? My mother's coffee, cookie, love, care, advice, concern, beatings also. Of all these responses, only one word, beating, is different from the rest of the words. The rest of the words are all about care and caretaking. This one is also, you would say, no, even beating is a form of expression when it comes to mothers, right? Okay, so beating, all right. But do you see, there's a pattern in what words will go with my mother's. If you talk about fathers, would you use the same words? My father's. Will you use exactly the same words? Scolding, anger, temper, care, all right. Girls insist, no, it's care also, okay. Guidelines, but do you still see there are patterns? Okay, father, yes, love, care, but then more than that, they are responsible for your future. They're responsible to make sure you go on the right path, so on and so forth. While mother and her role as a caregiver is also being reflected by, of course, a traditional role. We often talk about that, of course, in feminist studies, how words define a role, don't they? When you refer to a mother, you use certain kinds of words that define her role in the society. When you talk about a father, you use words that define his role in the society. And by repeating these words, we oftentimes perpetuate these notions. And these notions eventually become entrenched in the system. And they often come out in the form of social expression, social expectations. So we tell others, now you're a mother, you're supposed to do this, 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 this. Now you're a father, you're supposed to do this, 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 this. What all is the language that we use to express all this? We use words, right? And these words, they go together. That is collocation. Okay, so words do not come together randomly. There is again a particular pattern in which they come together, right? And of course, that was conceptual example, but if we can take a very grammatical example as well. If you say in front of, what will you see next? In front of? In front of the mirror, in front of the classroom, house. All the words that go after in front of are place names, right? Or a person name. So in front of my mother, you can say, of course, right? But they talk about some kind of location of something. And these are special kinds. You can't say in front of, okay, you can say in front of angry. It won't make any sense. In front of angry, and say what in front of angry? You can say in front of the angry man, but not in front of angry. They don't go together. This is grammatically wrong, conceptually wrong too. Okay, right? So that is what we talk about when we talk about collocation. And then there is concordance. Okay, concordance in corpus linguistics is the context within which a particular line is used, a particular expression is used. So concordance lines, I'll show you an example of that. These are the collocates I looked in from the same data set that I uploaded earlier. I took the word man and I tried to see what words man goes with. So these are the words with which they go. So there is smiling man, sensual man, public man, public. This is from the Wasteland, the poem. So the modern man, okay, so on and so forth. These are the words in which, now the collocation is not necessarily about one word next to the exact, right next to it. It can be two words after this as well, depending upon how you want to see the proximity. You can have collocation of one word before and after, or two words before and after, three words before and after, 10 words before and after. Okay? But if you want to look at the exact proximity, you may want to look at one or two words before and after. So you may wonder, how mockers and man go together. But mockers and man don't go together just next to each other. They are used in a particular expression. And concordance looks like this. You see the context in which a particular word is used. So the word man is used this way. The words in green are one word before, and words in red are two words before the keyword man. Okay, so these are concordance lines. They look like this. This is from a software, AntConc. AntConc is one of the softwares that I've used here. Now, what do you want to do with particular corpus? Now, these are three major tools we use in corpus linguistics. However, there are many more, but these are the three major ones. Now, I won't give the same example or similar examples anymore. Moving on to, this is going a little slow. So word frequency, collocation, and concordance. When you create your own corpus, you try to look for the demographic information from which time the corpus was, when the corpus was collected, by whom, who are the participants, who are the writers, so on and so forth, when it was produced, what kind of text it is, the genre, the register, for example, and what kind of, I'm sorry, there is an error, part of speech it should be. So what part of speech you are, each word will be tagged for a particular part of speech. If you are creating your own, corpus, you have to tag each word for a particular part of speech. If you're starting everything from scratch, but I don't think you need to do that anymore because software is available that will tag each word as a particular part of speech, right? So you will not need to do that. Some of the major corpora that are available are BNC, British National Corpus. There is COCA, that is Corpus of Contemporary American English. And there are specialized corpora like academic corpus. There are language corpora, so on and so forth. I'll show some examples in a while. These are some of the software that one can use to analyze the corpus that you may be working with. Sketch engine is one of the most popular software and the most effective one. The most effective in the sense it is much more nuanced in its results. It is much more detailed in its results. And then there is a Wordsmith, which is slightly older now. People don't use it so much, but you can still, if you want to begin with it. There is the entire English corpora. It has at least 20, 30 corpora within it from English itself. I'll show a sample of that in a while. And then there are corpora from different countries and different languages as such. As far as software are concerned, these are two major software that are freeware, Antconc and Lanxbox. Both are freely available. The samples that I showed earlier, they were from Antconc. I use Lanxbox as well from Lancaster University. So these are some of the. Now, as far as language learning and teaching is concerned, a couple of software that there are many again, but a few that you can use. One of them is Skell, which is a sub-corpus from Sketch Engine. Sketch Engine, by the way, is not free. You have to pay. You can have a 30-day trial, which is good to explore. But if you want to really use it, you would have to pay about 800 rupees per month, like that. But it's worth it if you are really into corpus-based study or research. It would be worth it. Skell is free. Skell is available for everybody. And then there is LexTutor, Just the Word, and so on and so forth. I will show you a sample from Skell. Now these corpora, they can be from different aspects. They can refer to different aspects. They can be related to different kinds of work in language learning and teaching. For example, assignments, research articles, proposals, emails. These corpora are based on these kinds of texts, and you can use them to teach these texts as well, right? And then there are spoken corpus as well. Now, one of the things we often work with when we teach speaking, listening and speaking, we often work in language labs, and we have pre-recorded audio. And it so happens, in fact, after a few years, they become dated. Because what they may be talking about, the university college may have paid lakhs and lakhs of rupees on particular language lab software, but considering how fast language itself is changing, 5 years down the line, everything becomes old. These software, they keep everything updated. So if one would want to do so, one can use these software in classroom. They are often updated. They present real samples from real language use. Now, of course, you have to be a little bit conscious about the language itself, because as I said, they are real language from real context. Some of the language used may not be appropriate for a classroom. So you have to really sift through all those data set, and you may have to eliminate whatever is not appropriate for a classroom. Otherwise, you can use transcript these conversations and spoken texts of various kinds. This is an example this is a screenshot from COCA, that is Corpus of Contemporary American English. It's getting updated every day. And it's a wonderful database that gives you a good idea of how American English is changing over the years. You can also compare year-wise. For example, you may want to see, a very good example is the use of the term corona itself. Before 2020, hardly anybody used the term corona. And it will be, you won't just make a guess about it, you can actually show in the data set itself, there's no, or there is hardly any mention of the term corona itself, right? And then once 2020 arrives, after that, whatever data set you will be exploring, it will be full of coronavirus, coronavirus, or the collocation coronavirus. Earlier, even if you had corona, it would be not related to virus. It would be corona as in the corona around the sun or any other term, but not coronavirus. That change in language use is reflected by these software. This is an example from BNC, British National Corpus. The end closing bracket is missing. I'm sorry about that. So I'll take you back to some of the software that I mentioned. So here is Skell. This is a web page of Skell. And if you want to explore this, you can start with a simple keyword, any word that comes to your mind, or any word that your students talk about. They might want to know how to use this particular word. What are the synonyms of these words? Is this word used with this word or not? So on and so forth. This is different kinds of questions they may have. Now, this is available on phone as well. So you don't have to download the software. It is a web page, website. So there is no need to download anything as such. On a regular phone, it's available. And students can use it for self-study. You can give assignments related to words and phrases and expressions. It can be from any domain, because this is not just limited to a particular domain or English. It covers almost all domains. It's a general corpus. So, but then one thing you have to do, you have to design your assignment, your term paper, or your activity. And if you're working especially with vocabulary, this is an exceptional tool for that. So vocabulary-related activities, writing-related activities will work very, very well with this particular software. So here, for example, can you give an example of a word? Any word that you wondered about, you think? Okay, we are still with English literature. Okay, patriarchy we want to work with. And we want to know what patriarchy is. Okay, so what you see here, the first result, you see 3 tabs there: examples, word sketch, and similar words. 3 examples there. And what we see here, we see actual use of the word patriarchy. As I mentioned before, these are not invented examples. This is not language created by an educator or textbook writer. This is language actually used by people. And all these examples are from a vast corpus that Sketch Engine has accumulated over the years. Sketch Engine has billions of words. And this is just one small list from that usage. So you can see how patriarchy is used in sentences, right? So, sorry. So for example, gender discrimination is closely related to the patriarchy. Example 5 I'm reading from. We must overcome patriarchy to free women's sexuality. Number 7. Okay. Then number 9, I'm so sick of this patriarchy. I'm so sick of this. Patriarchy hurts men too. Now you can see the real world example part. If it were written by a textbook writer, there are errors in this sentence, aren't there? What errors? As teachers, you would see that there are errors here. And so that's why you have to be careful about using these tools. You are projecting it in a classroom, you have to at least bring in a word of caution, saying that these are real world language usages, and there may be some errors as well. Okay. So, so real people okay, again, the disclaimer part. Real people commit violence, not patriarchy. What does that mean? Patriarchy doesn't do any of this. It's people who do it. Anyway, so now again with loaded words, you have to be careful. These are loaded words. In classroom, would you want to, with older students, of course, you may want to use these terms. With master students, PhD students, you may want to use, you may want to look for these expressions. But with younger students, you have to be careful using terms which may be quite loaded, in the sense they might go in any direction. Okay, so now this is word sketch. So these are the examples. If you click it, the word sketch part, what do we see? We see a whole list of associated words. So verbs with patriarchy as subject. Okay, so what does that mean? Verbs with patriarchy as subject. These are the words with which patriarchy, I'm sorry, let's go back to that. So you don't have to click, actually it goes like this here. So these are the, you can see, oppressed, for example, is used as a subject with the word patriarchy here. Similarly, if you use adjective with patriarchy, this is a list of adjectives that goes with the word patriarchy itself. Okay. Similarly, modifiers, and this is of course when you're teaching grammar. So internalized patriarchy, this is a verb with patriarchy as object. So internalized patriarchy here is the object. Okay, so on and so forth. First, this goes beyond this, all kinds of words, modifiers, and so on and so forth. And if you now this gives you words that are similar to the term or associate close. Now, similar here doesn't mean synonyms, please. These are not synonyms. They are words associated with the word patriarchy. So you have a whole bunch of words that are more frequently used with the word patriarchy by people. Okay. Let's look at one word which is quite frequently used in English. It says there's no result with prepone. Why not? Don't we have a word called prepone? Is there? Only in India. So apparently standard English does not recognize prepone. There's nothing called prepone. Okay, they'll say either you advance things or you postpone things. You don't prepone things. Okay. So there is no example with prepone. This is Indian English. Of course, being proud Indians, we can claim that we have our own specialized version of English, which we call Indian English. However, it's extremely difficult to define what Indian English is. And there is there's at least 20, 30 years old debate that is still going on about the nature of Indian English, whether it actually exists or not, and in what form it exists, and if it does exist, where is the recorded evidence of it? Where is the systematically recorded evidence of it? So there is no consensus about the existence of something called Indian English, though we like to call it Indian English or Tamil English or Punjabi English or whatever other term we might use. So prepone apparently does not exist. But then, can you suggest some other terms? We use words like revert back to me. Okay, so revert and teachers will say, oh no, we teachers, we like to correct people. So we don't say revert back, you revert to me. Okay, you say there's nothing called revert back, that is an oxymoron. It doesn't go like that, you know. So here we have revert. Do you see an example of revert and back? To prove your point, you can show something like this. Is there any example of revert back? As we said, this is actual language used most probably by native speakers, but not all native speakers, but native speakers. Again, the whole idea of native speaker is challenged these days. Native speakers of English, who are native speakers of English? The Indians, who are the largest group of speakers of English as a second language, or the Britishers, who are like very small group of people who speak English as a first language. Britishers, Americans, all combined, we are still larger in number. Even if Indian English is not our first language, it's our second language. Right? So again, revert. Anything called revert back? Not really. Not really. If we look at now, if you see there's an exact number here. 7.47 hits per million. Now you don't have to really focus on that, but it shows some data. What does it mean? It means per million words this is the frequency of this word revert. Every 1 million word you'll come across, every 7.4 million words you will come across this word, revert. Okay. So the more frequent a word is, the smaller this number will be. For example, and. So how many hits per million? You see the large number here. Because and is one of the most frequently used conjunctions. Okay, right? So per million word frequency increases definitely. And you have these examples of and. But these are examples only of where and starts the sentence. It goes beyond that, of course. Okay, one second. Not really. Can you give me some other word? Last example before we wrap up. Any other word? Any other word? Any popular word that we want to look up? Not patriarchy. Something simple. Engineering, okay. Engineering students, of course, are interested in. What happened here? Here. We have this whole list of words that goes with engineering as a subject, as an object. Object here is as in a position of the word, part of speech. Adjectives with engineering. Were you aware of this? These adjectives going with engineering, do you use any of these adjectives? Apparently, a lot of people are using it. Mathematical engineering is very popular. Victorian. First-rate engineering is popular, all right. Research-focused. Okay, all right. Fine. A very quick look at some other software. This is a software called Linguistics. And this is used for, again, something similar. Okay, one of my favorite examples, revert. Here is revert. And what can you do with this? It can show you the word in context. And there is a question mark. I recommend that you explore these options with the question marks. Now, it's not just the word that you can look for. You can also look for other things. For example, how to use revert in a sentence. What other words can be used with sentences, with revert, so on and so forth. For example, okay, let's talk about this particular one. Do we use discuss about? Apparently, some people do use discuss about, but a very small minority. We are trying to use simple words. We are running out of time. I'm really sorry about that. I strongly recommend just use your phone and use this. Okay. So here, now what we can do in classroom is we can use a lot of people use discuss about. We can use this as an example. So you put the word discuss, put a question mark, and use about, and show whether discuss about is used at all or not. So discuss about is probably used by some people, but the large majority only uses discuss. You don't use a word like about with discuss. What is about? Which part of speech? Conjunction or preposition? All right. So anyway, you don't use any of these words with about. Sorry, with discuss. It's just discuss. You discuss this, discuss that. You don't discuss about this or about that. Okay, I think I will stop. A very quick look at some other software. There is this. There is the COCA that I mentioned, Corpus of Contemporary American English. It takes a little time to work with this, to get a hang of it, but it's a wonderful software. It's available online. There's no, you can't download it. And then there are many other. I have the whole list ready here. This is for teachers, again, teachers who have some time to explore Corpus tools for language classroom. It can create activities for you. For example, closed tests, concordance-based tests, and so on and so forth. But it again requires some time to figure out. But you don't have to work to create your own activities for corpus linguistics. Here it can create activities for you. But you need to really explore some of those options given there. For example, there are flashcards, tests, close, and so on and so forth. Those you can create using the software. And then there is Collocate also. Again, I will not go too much into it at the moment. This is the famous sketch engine that I talked about. I don't have it downloaded, so I can't really show you. So what can you, back to, I think, my last slide, very quickly. So you can work, usually corpus tools are used for first language learning and teaching, curriculum development, and literary analysis. Also in stylistics, we use corpus tools. Lexicography, the oldest field in which we use corpus linguistics. Okay, these are some of the examples of where it has already been used, that is dictionary compilation. Scale I have already displayed. If you have any questions, you can ask. With this, I end, though I have a lot that I can talk about. I would like to stop here. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I think I can answer some of those. Do please understand that you don't have to necessarily use it for research or for any specialized work in corpus linguistics. Though the work, very specialized work is taking place in using corpus tools, but it can be used for everyday exploration of language, English language especially. So it's very convenient that way.
If we write a paper, we need to use on a specific usage, right? Yes, paper has to be very specific in terms of research, narrowed down research, right? We cannot be using it in a generic way. So what you have stated is for your candidates are doing it for the Twitter terms and the newspapers, all this.
Absolutely.
Now, if we are focusing on writing a paper using any corpus, how we can segregate the research topics?
Ma'am, one thing I would like to talk about is any research that you take, it has to start from a research problem. Okay. There has to be a research problem. There should be a problem that you need to solve through that research. And that further leads to research questions. What are the aspects of that problem that you would see? A problem might have multiple aspects. You can't work on all aspects. So you would need to identify special aspects of that problem first. And if one of the research questions can, or one or many of the research questions can be asked using some of these corpus tools, then you will use them. There are two ways of approaching this. One is from the perspective of a linguist who would want to create a corpus itself. That itself is a worthy task, the creation of corpus itself. And you don't work in isolation. You work with a computer scientist. So for example, you want to create a corpus of I'm sure it already exists, but you might want to create a corpus of Tamil literature or Tamil literature from this region. How do you do that? Most books are in print forms. They're not digitalized. You need to get digitalized text. So what do? You work with a computer scientist. You say, these are the texts that I have collected. I want to create a corpus of this. Now, the computer science person would not know which work has what value. They may not know which work carries what kind of context, reference, so on and so forth. The literature part only you know. The computer science person will help you convert that into corpus, right? So they will work as per your instructions, as per your guidelines. So the metadata I mentioned, the context of the text, the other information about the text, all that you have to provide, and the computer scientist will create the corpus for you. And that is how all these corpora were created, in collaboration with the computer scientist, with linguists. So that is the creation part. Then there is the other part wherein you use what is already created, or you create your own small corpus using one of the software. You upload data, that's all. So you have digital text already, for example, newspaper corpora, and you upload that text and you study it. So the second aspect wherein you study what already exists or is created by you is mostly of interest to linguists or language scholars. And what you study from that, using that corpus, depends on what your research question is. So for example, I gave the example of my student who is working with climate-based editorials on climate change. So she's not just studying what words are used to refer to climate change. She's also looking for how these words are used, right? Referring to what they're used. So she has identified 3 frames so far. So one of the frames is the economic frame. So in that corpus, what words refer to economy and climate? Okay, so she has an entire set of words that work with climate change and economy, because the Eastern countries, India especially, has had this policy position that we will not let our economy get affected because the Western countries want us to cut down on carbon emission. They say, no, why should we do that? You people have already done it. Now you want us to stagnate economically, industrially. We won't do it. But then she has also found that over the years, India's stand has changed a little bit. And she did not look at that, she did not find that only by looking at individual words. You also study what goes with these words, the larger context. And so what was the research question? The research question was, what are the frames with which these editorials present climate change in India? And the frames emerged, and that research question led to corpus-based study. And that corpus-based study or data showed us, the detailed analysis showed us that these were the 3 frames. I hope I'm a little clear about that. So these are, for linguists, to a great extent, these are just tools. They are methods, and through which you use tools. By themselves, they will not answer any questions. By themselves, they will not tell you anything. Like all machines, it's the human who has to use it to his or her benefit for a particular purpose. That is how it works. Here also, when you show it in a classroom, what words you use there, you will use deliberately certain words. You won't use any random word, right, for teaching. So again, it's the human intervention part here which will make it effective or not so effective eventually. I hope I'm able to answer your question partly. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Would I prefer? Unfortunately, I am not teaching undergraduate classes anymore. If I were teaching undergraduate classes, I would surely use these software because I find they are very interactive, and I'm sure students would be very interested in these because, yes, in this college you're not allowed to use phones, but in most colleges, other colleges you are, and I'm sure they can use it that way. But even if they're not, I think using classroom software, using the language lab itself, a lot of work can be done using this, surely. It's also about student autonomy and engagement, basically. It all boils down to that. It gives the student a chance to explore language on their own. Right? All right.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
And let us break for tea now. And participants who have asked for accommodation, could you please do the payment now? Or asked to, okay.